What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Glad to have everybody back into the show here. It is Dawg Talk. I am your host, Holden. As always, glad to have everybody here as we get geared up to rock and roll through another episode. We are 17 days away from kickoff, which is kind of hard to believe, to be honest with you, because it feels like just yesterday we were coming off a national championship and we knew we had a whole spring to go through. We knew we had a whole summer to go through, fall camps, all of that. We had a lot that we had to get through before we got to this point. We are knee-deep right now, knee-deep in fall camp. We are knee-deep in battling for certain positions on the field. We're going to talk about some of those. We've got some injuries, a lot of stuff to talk about. Loaded show that we've got coming to you guys. I'm excited to get this show out to you guys. As always, I do want to make sure I get this right. We're back up and running on YouTube here. Make sure you guys follow us on Twitter at Dawg Talk 20, Instagram at Dawg Talk 20, all of the things there that you'll see kind of floating across the screen here if you guys are watching on YouTube. If you guys aren't watching on YouTube, please, if you guys don't mind, go and check out the channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. If you like the video, leave a comment, just interaction, stuff like that. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. All that does is just kind of help us grow. And last but not least, up on Patreon, if you guys feel like supporting the show, make sure you hit that link. I'll leave all of these links in the description of the show like I always do, whether you're listening on Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, doesn't matter. All of these links will be in the show below. Patreon.com/Dawg Talk. Click on that link there. If you want to support the show, it gives you the option to leave a donation for the show, and I would greatly appreciate it. So some of the stuff that we have on tap for this week that I want to make sure we get to. 17 days left. We're going to talk about some NFL stuff that's going on right now. The AP poll came out. I think since even since the last time we have spoken on this show, the coaches poll actually came out first, and then the AP poll came out. And then we're going to talk about some stuff that's just kind of entertaining to me that I feel like I wanted to share with you guys. We're going to get into some of the conversation from the scrimmage that happened this past weekend. We've got the second scrimmage that is coming up this weekend. We've obviously got, again, fall camp that's going on, practices that are happening daily. We're going to be talking about defense today and prepping up for that second scrimmage that we've got going on. So throughout this episode, you're going to see me drink some coffee, because that's what makes the world go round and keeps me awake as I'm doing the show later on in the evening for you guys. Again, if you guys are watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe. Again, if you guys are listening on podcast, go and check out the YouTube channel. That link is in the description. So let's get into it. First thing, Stetson Bennett makes his NFL debut. I know he's not on Georgia's roster anymore. He was on there for a really long time. We all know that. No longer on it. He is now playing for the Rams, and the dude balled out. I know it's a preseason game, but regardless, the dude comes in there, defies all odds, because we all said that he couldn't do it when he was in college. Didn't think that he could lead Georgia in the way that he did to one national championship, much less two, and he did those things. A lot of people didn't think he'd be drafted. He was not only drafted, but is playing and getting meaningful snaps in the preseason. What's going to happen during the season, I don't know. I'm not a big follower of the NFL myself personally, and that's okay because to me, college is bigger, better, more fun for me to watch. I enjoy it more than I do the NFL side of things, and I have my reasoning for it just like everybody else does. Again, everybody's entitled to those opinions, and for me, it's just I like watching college football. It's so much more entertaining. And it also doesn't help that the Falcons are not good, and they haven't been good for a few years now. So that does make it a little bit tougher when that's your team that you're rooting for. But Stetson Bennett makes his debut in the NFL in the preseason game. Dude goes 17 for 29, almost throws for 200 yards and a touchdown. One of the only quarterbacks that was drafted in the quarterbacks drafted this past season that actually threw a touchdown in this preseason game. I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit because, again, I'm telling you, it's preseason. We've got a lot that we've got to get into when NFL season truly starts. Will he be a starter? I don't know. Matthew Stafford's back. He's there. And my stupid self, a couple of weeks ago talking to Hunter, I thought that Stafford somehow had retired. I guess I'd heard so many other different guys that were retiring. And I knew Stafford. I didn't see him much last year. I didn't realize he got injured. Again, I'm not following the NFL like that. And Stafford, he's been around for a long time, playing at Detroit, and then obviously now playing with the Rams. So he's been around. He's been around for a long time, and he really hasn't dealt with injury much. So for him to be out with injury, I guess, was just kind of a surprise to me, and I didn't realize it. Never realized it. So my stupid self thought he retired. But regardless, he didn't. He's there. What a great mentor. You got two Dawgs as quarterbacks over there at the Rams. That was one thing I was talking to a friend of mine about yesterday. It's really hard for you to pick one team that you want to follow in the NFL. For me, it is the Falcons, as far as if I'm following a team and before a season everybody says, hey, claim your team now. Well, the Falcons would be my team. But it's hard to cheer for your team when the Dawgs is who you're cheering for in college, and we don't have a lot of dogs with Atlanta. I mean, Philadelphia, look at that defense. I mean, how can you not cheer for the guys who've gone on to play defense for them? Cheering for Stetson, playing for the Rams. We've got guys that are all over the place. The Steelers, we've got Darnell Washington and George Pickens over there. So it makes it a lot tougher when the Georgia guys are spread out everywhere. I just kind of like just watching and seeing how they're doing, seeing how they're progressing, seeing how things are going since they left Georgia and now they're in the NFL, starting their careers, seeing what they're doing there. So I'm not a big NFL guy, but a guy who is going to be a big NFL guy, perfect transition into it, is Brock Bowers. This dude, we know what he's done for the past 2 seasons at Georgia. Undeniable, one of the best players in the country. ESPN, I think it was, that came out with the ranking. It could have been On3. There's so many different platforms now that put out these rankings for it. It's hard for me to keep up who's putting out what ranking. But I think it was ESPN. Regardless, doesn't matter. Puts Brock Bowers as the number 2 player in the country coming into this season, right behind Marvin Harrison Jr. There at Ohio State. I believe it. I mean, really, it's not even a try to put this many guys in a page and say, all right, I got 10 guys, best players in the country. Obviously, these are the reasons why. And leaving Brock Bowers out of that conversation is null and void. You cannot do it. He has proven not only to be the best tight end in the country right now, but, again, when he's finishing ranked second in the nation as a player standpoint, not just a position, but a player in the entire nation, as the second, that tells you this dude's got the NFL caliber already. He had it last year as a sophomore. As a freshman, he blew up, obviously. So we got the junior year coming of Brock Bowers. Man, that's exciting. That's exciting. I've been seeing more and more about Oscar Delp and how much he's growing, and he's trying to not necessarily fill that hole that Big O, Darnell Washington, left, because there's a reason he was called Big O. That's a big dude. It's hard to fill the shoes of a guy like that, but he's doing it. I've heard where he's been bulking up and getting better. So that's exciting. But Brock Bowers, he's got an NFL future in his future. He's got an NFL career in his future. Let's go with that. How about that? We'll word it a little bit better. But as we were talking about earlier, the AP poll did come out. The coaches poll came out earlier. Before that, I think like a week before that. Again, it's been a little bit since we've talked, but now that we have, AP poll comes out, coaches poll comes out. Georgia's on top of the coaches poll. Georgia is also on top of the AP poll. I wanted to kind of look at the top 5, top 10 right here for the AP poll and kind of run through it with you guys. Georgia at 1, Michigan 2, Ohio State 3, Alabama 4, LSU 5, USC 6, Penn State 7, Florida State 8, Clemson 9, and number 10, Washington. Just outside of that is Texas and Tennessee. As far as for my predictions preseason go in the SEC, some of these, I start to look at, okay, you got Alabama there at 4, LSU right behind them. Again, I've got 1 and 2 as my preseason rankings at least. 1 and 2, I've got LSU and Alabama 1 and 2. And I've got LSU above Alabama, beating them and playing for the SEC championship game. But I could see a world where maybe Alabama does that. To me, I am not seeing that kind of season from Alabama this year. Eventually, maybe when the season starts, I'll probably put out how I actually got to the rankings that I did, because it's not just a 1 through 7. You actually have to put the games that they've played into a measurement to see how they finish that way. And I don't have Alabama being nearly as good as not only this preseason AP poll is and what it's showing, but by the end of the year, I don't think that they're going to be as high as they are this year. I think this is going to be – it's hard to say that last year was a step-back year for them. But to me, this year is going to be even more of a step back. So if it's more of a step back than it was last year, they didn't play for the SEC championship game and they didn't play in the college football playoffs, what does that tell you? Just my opinion. Again, not an Alabama show, but we're going to talk about some of these AP poll rankings right here. LSU, I like them at 5 again. I think they're going to be a pretty good team this year. A couple of the ones that stand out to me that I don't really see, I don't really get why they're sitting where they are, is number 7, Penn State. Again, I get the returning factor, the guys that you're getting back, but Penn State, to me, they've been so overwhelming, or underwhelming, excuse me. They'll have these big games, and they get in the big games, and they don't win them. It's a lot of what Georgia was battling a couple of years ago. We would get in these big games, and we would not win them. And Penn State's kind of been that. Maybe they'll break through this year and change that. USC had the chance last year to do that, and they lost games that they shouldn't have late in the season. It's the only reason they got left out. So I understand them being up there. I like Florida State this year. I think they're going to be really good this year. As a matter of fact, I like them being one above Clemson because I think this is the year they'll eclipse Clemson and take the ACC by hand. Who knows what's about to happen with all these conferences? I mean, the Pac-12 just about doesn't exist anymore. The Big Ten is no longer 10. It's Big 40 up there. SEC's growing next year by 2. But if there were 2 teams that I would want to take out of the ACC, if all this is going to realign and we're going to just keep moving and all of a sudden have 2 super conferences, that's 2 teams I'd like, Clemson and Florida State, to join. But if they leave and end up joining the Big Ten, and then all of a sudden you get like Cal and Stanford coming from the Atlantic or Pacific Pac-12, I just said it, yeah, coming from the Pac-12 and they join the ACC, well, how are you going to have a Pacific Coast team playing for an Atlantic Coast team? You're going to have to change the name of it to like National Coast Conference. So it's going to end up being like the NCC or something like that. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, over the past 3 weeks, seeing what all's happened, the Pac-12 is down to like 4 teams, if it's even that, as we're speaking right now. I mean, teams are just leaving left and right. Teams are leaving, going everywhere. It's bonkers. And we can't say much because we brought 2 teams in ourselves. They're coming in, Oklahoma and Texas next year. But, I mean, ever since then, it just ramped up. And a part of me gets it. Part of me gets it's like, okay, well, the Big Ten, they want to get a couple of other good teams in there as well. But all of a sudden, it's like there's 8 or 10 more teams that are joining the Big Ten along with what's already in there. And then, obviously, the Pac-12 just completely dwindling. The Big 12 is growing, which is kind of a surprise that, you would think, okay, Texas, Oklahoma, they get out of the Big 12. That's going to probably do it for that conference. No. They start to pick up like Colorado, a couple other teams. They're going to grow, and that's all of a sudden going to become a bigger league. Maybe not necessarily bigger, but it's going to continue to exist as opposed to the Pac-12. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I don't think you can really have a conference with 4 teams in it. I don't think you can call it a conference. That's really just a group of teams over there. Maybe that's what's considered a conference. I don't know, but again, back to the AP poll here at 10, Washington. I don't understand the hype, behind them. But again, I'm not paying a whole lot of attention to the Huskies over there. So maybe they make a run for it. Texas at 11, I don't mind that. That's interesting. Tennessee, as much as I hate to admit it, I think they're a little low at 12. I think they're going to have a really good season. But that's just, again, my opinion. So some of the others, you got Notre Dame there at 13. Notre Dame's got to prove it this year. This is a season to me that I could see Notre Dame finishing like in the top 20, maybe top 25. But last year was not very exciting. Granted, they picked it up against South Carolina in the bowl game last year, so maybe that was a pickup for them. Some of the other ones just looking, TCU at 17. They had a great year last year, obviously, playing in the national championship game. We know what happened in the national championship game, but I think the only reason TCU is ranked 17th is because they played in the national championship game last year. So you have to give them a little bit of love and say, okay, you played for the national championship. We can't go from you playing for a national championship to being not ranked. I don't think they're going to be ranked by the end of this season. They lost a ton, not only in team, but personnel, staff members. They lost a lot at TCU, and this could be very well the 2021 season of TCU happening in 2023 following a national championship season, just with how much they lost. And then kind of looking at some of the rest, you got Oklahoma in there, North Carolina, they'll be pretty good. Ole Miss, Texas A&M. I don't have the Texas A&M hype. Again, to me, looking back at my preseason poll or my preseason prediction anyway, I got Texas A&M 6th in the West. 6th. I don't see it. But I also see things in my eyes, at least, that seem a little bit different. seem a little bit different than what a lot of the other talking heads are saying. And that's some of what we'll kind of get into as we start to move forward with this episode. And with that, the transfer portal is also a wide open kind of a deal right now, just like all of these conference realignment. I don't even know how you call it conference realignment right now. It's not conference realignment. It's conference chaos is what it is, because you got teams, going left and right, and then you got the transfer portal that's running wide open here too, but then you kind of block it off to some kids where they have the opportunity to transfer, but they don't. But then you got a JT Daniels who's playing for a fifth school in 5 years. People are everywhere. So that's why I kind of get into recruiting. And the reason I want to bring this up is I don't talk a lot about recruiting on this show. And there's a reason. One, it takes a lot of time to keep up with the recruiting, crystal balling guys and seeing where they're going to go. I may look at a guy and think, okay, yeah, I could see him coming to Georgia. He seems to have really good favoritism over here. He likes the coaches, everything about Georgia. Boom, he turns out goes to FSU, goes to Missouri, whether it's NIL money or what. So for me, I'm not investing a lot of time in the recruiting, one, because of that, and as far as the transfer situation and everything goes, but two is the NIL deals that are starting to pop up and become a thing that teams can do. Now, I'm not saying NIL as far as like you come to a school and yes, I 100% agree. You should get paid for your name, image, and likeness. I'm not saying that you shouldn't at all. But now, like Missouri, I think their state has passed a law that you can literally pay for a player to come, and they can start to receive funds in their senior season in high school coming to your school. And when this starts happening, it's all of a sudden going to change things for recruiting. Makes it even more difficult to recruit, but it also makes it even more difficult to follow what recruiting is. But the main reason that I don't talk a lot about recruiting is some of them don't stick. A lot of them don't stick. We've had multiple guys that committed to the University of Georgia. Yeah, we're fired up. We're excited. Whether it's a commitment video post, it doesn't matter. We're glad this guy's coming. 3 weeks go by, 2 months go by. We get time for the season. The dude up and decides, never mind, decommits, decides to go somewhere else, comes in, transfers, leaves the team, what have you. So I don't follow recruiting as hard as most do. I will occasionally talk about some as far as if we get a guy that's actually committed to Georgia and he's early signing day and we're going to see him in December, something like that. But for the most part, you're not going to see me talking much about recruiting. And I just wanted to kind of say why. So if anybody cares or anybody wanted to know why as far as that goes. Last little bit of news before we kind of start to get into some of the show here. Did you guys hear about what's going on with The Blind Side and Michael Orr? I'm sure most of you have, but I guess the Tuohys signed like a conservatorship, and Michael Orr was never receiving any money for the movie The Blind Side. Now, kind of running it in reverse here, rewinding back to it. From my understanding, Michael Orr, he's already said, I never watched the movie, and a lot of what happened in the movie, from what he's been told or what others have been told, is not how it happened. First of all, I want to say this. The people who acted in this movie are actors. They have nothing to do with this. That's the first thing. Anytime you have a Hollywood movie, most of the time, it is going to be embellished a little bit to make the movie good, to make it an exciting movie, to make people want to pay to come and watch it. Otherwise, why are you going to come and pay to watch a movie if it's not that exciting? You get like a documentary like the Johnny Manziel one that just came out. Entertaining, but you're not having to pay to watch it unless it's a subscription to Netflix. But you're not having to pay to watch that. And was it entertaining? Yes, but that's not a movie that you're going to turn into an hour and a half. Could you sell tickets to that? Probably. Will it bust? Will it make it? I don't know. I'm not a movie guy. But some things in movies you do have to embellish to make it a good movie. So, no, I don't think that movie was fully perfect as far as how things actually went in Michael Orr's life. But now to kind of turn around and see that, hey, they weren't even paying the guy for essentially using his story, or at least parts of his story, in this. And when I first saw it, I was like, oh, man, this is a guy who's retired and he just needs money. And then I started kind of reading about it. I was like, oh, no. This is wrong. This is wrong. And they have now confirmed, from my understanding, that yes, they signed a conservatorship for him, and he I guess assumed or thought that he had been adopted this entire time. Wasn't true. Never was adopted. Wasn't adopted, which is unbelievable to me because that was, again, when you watch the movie, I get it. I understand. It's embellished a little bit. It's not going to be perfect. It's not straight in the line, but when you watch it, you still kind of believe some of it. And then it's like, okay, well, he even thought that he's adopted. Then he goes to Ole Miss, which is, they're essentially boosters of, they kind of talk about that in the movie a little bit. And then obviously he goes on, has a great career, crazy good high school player. The thing that blew my mind was learning that, no, he was already at that school before. The movie portrays it as he's picked up on the side of the road essentially and taught how to play football. But he was already there. He was already there and enrolled at the school that they put him in the movie, regardless. We're not going to dive too deep into the movie here, but I thought that was kind of wild what's going on with that. And kind of sad, too. Kind of sad to an extent when you kind of take advantage of somebody like that. So hopefully they get all that figured out because, listen, I'm not the judge here, not meant to be, and they'll figure out everything that they've got to figure out in this. But if in fact everything that has been said so far and is being investigated at this moment comes out to be true, the Dewey's in trouble. That's all there is to it. And that's a really sad situation for Michael Orr himself, if that's the way that things truly did play out, which right now that's the way it looks like things went. So they'll get all that geared up. But I wanted to kind of talk about this as we get into it because talking about Michael Orr brings me into Ole Miss. And Ole Miss is a team that Georgia's going to play this year. We play later on in the season. But regardless, Ole Miss is still a team that Georgia is going to play. And it's later on in the season, but I'm curious to know, will Ole Miss actually be able to compete against Georgia this year? And on the flip side of that is me thinking about Hugh Freeze. And Hugh Freeze was actually, this is another thing I didn't realize until reading more about it. He was actually on Michael Orr's high school team. And then as Michael Orr goes to Ole Miss, so does Hugh Freeze. I don't know what position he came in. He wasn't head coach directly after that, but Hugh Freeze then moves there. We all know what happened after that. He, a lot of stuff goes on, yada, yada, yada. Ends up at Liberty, boom, now he's at Auburn. He's now at Auburn. Auburn is obviously a team that Georgia plays every single year, this year included. I'm not high on Auburn. I'm higher on Ole Miss than I am Auburn, but I started looking back at last year and thinking, okay, let's just take a quick minute here. Ole Miss at one point in time was ranked like 7th, undefeated. They go to play LSU, and I think it's at LSU, matter of fact. LSU by this point has already lost 2 football games. We're already 7 weeks into the season, working on week 8 in this game. LSU ends up going on to beat Ole Miss, and things just kind of flip-flopped. Obviously, LSU took off, really good team, ends up playing in the SEC championship against Georgia, completely unmatched in that game. But regardless, Ole Miss just kind of started to trickle down the line. And it started looking like, okay, these are these big games that Lane Kiffin gets in again. He's got good players. He's returning a lot of players this year. Got a really good team, could compete. Can he compete in the big games like Georgia that he's going to have to compete in later on in the season? And then I fast forward and I look at, okay, we got Auburn, one of the greatest rivalries there is in the SEC, Deep South's oldest rivalry. There's the reason it's got a name to it. And the past couple of years, Auburn really hasn't competed with Georgia. Now, the only caveat that I would hold to this is it is Jordan Hare. We know about the prayer in Jordan Hare. We know what happened all those years ago and how Georgia somehow would fall apart in games that we would go to Jordan Hare and not be able to play against Auburn. I don't see it happening this year. I really don't. My preseason prediction has Ole Miss like middle of the pack in the West, maybe a little bit higher, anywhere between 3 and 6 or 3 and 5 is where I have Ole Miss. I've got Auburn at the bottom. At the very bottom of the West. Part of the reason is this. I want you guys to listen. I was watching this the other day. Some of this I get it is probably some coach talk, but to me, I kind of listen to the coaches, and this is on Marty McGee on SEC Network. I kind of listen to what some of the coaches are saying. Some of it's fun, they kind of cut up with Sam Pittman and some of these other guys, and even Kirby Smart when he came in. I think they talked to him earlier today, if that wasn't yesterday. It may have been yesterday, doesn't matter. But Kirby, he has his coach talk, but at the same time, he's still kind of, okay, yeah, we were national champions last year, but I got to tell my team, hey, you ain't done nothing this year. You got to learn. You got to go from there. But I want you guys to listen because I was listening to Hugh Freeze, and I was like, wait a minute. You know, most coaches are either going to give you that talk to try to get a point across to their own team, or they're going to do what Hugh Freeze did. Take a listen to this. Tell me what you guys think.
What is the difference between what Auburn football is right now as we sit here versus what it was when you walked in the door?
I tell everybody, I believe with all my heart that we've improved the roster since our arrival. I have no clue if that means we close the gap any on Alabama, Georgia, LSU, A&M, whoever else you want to mention. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I know we're a better Auburn football team than we were when I arrived. I just don't know, won't be able to tell until we get into the season, was it enough to give us a chance to compete in year one?
So they're listening to that. I don't hear a very confident Hugh Freeze coming into the season. Yes, he says, I think that we've got a better football team than when I arrived. I do think that they've got some good recruiting battles that they've won. They've got some guys they've recruited in and they've brought in to the University of Auburn, or that will be coming here in the future. But you hear him say it there off the top. I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if it's enough to kind of level up and compete, you know, with the Georgias, the LSUs, the Alabamas that are playing this year. I don't know if it's enough. You know, he doesn't know until we get into the season, you know, if you're going to have enough. You know, to me, I could be reading this all wrong, but when I hear that, okay, I hear a coach that's saying, I really don't know. I don't know if the team, I think that the team that I have when I came in is now better since I came in, but I don't know if we're ready to compete in those big games yet. To me, that sounds like a coach who's, one, I mean, he's not sure, obviously, but it makes me wonder, is Auburn going to be able to compete at all? Not only against Georgia this year, but can they compete in the West at all? Listening to him say that right there, I don't think so. And there's a reason that I have them at least preseason poll. I've got them coming in dead last in the SEC West. This is where I have them lining up in the West, is dead last at Auburn. Again, I've got Ole Miss anywhere between 3 and 5 because Arkansas, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, they're on 3, 4, and 5. I told you guys when we did this preseason prediction poll, I think you can kind of interchange those. Flip them around. Depends on how they play when they play one another. Obviously, Mississippi State, Ole Miss play each other at the end of the season. But for Auburn, I don't see them having a good season. I don't think it's going to be a very good year. I think it's going to be a really rough and rocky start for Hugh Freeze, and that's okay. Most coaches start to kind of catch that lightning in the bottle by that second season. You start to get a recruiting class, and you start to get players to buy into the guys that you've brought in, whether it's coordinators, whatever the situation is. But I just don't see them competing, especially after hearing Hugh Freeze and that. Listen, it's a TV show. It's entertainment. Maybe some of that is him just being kind of entertaining. Maybe it's his way of saying, I'm going to say this. This is my way of hustling a little bit. I'm going to say this and just see if it kind of gets people going, I don't think he's very confident over there. And then you walk into Jordan Hare and you get beat. Maybe. But the way that I listen to that there, I just don't know. I don't think so. I don't think that's what's happening there. Again, I don't see Auburn having all that great of a season. And that's what it is. Hey, glad to have you guys here in the show. Make sure you guys hit that like button if you are watching over on YouTube. Leave a comment. I'd appreciate it. Patreon.com/Dawg Talk. I would greatly appreciate it. If you guys want to support the show, follow us on Twitter at Dawg Talk 20. Let's get into some other fun stuff here. Coming into it, first scrimmage happened last week. Had the first scrimmage last weekend. Kirby comes onto the podium and talks a little bit about what he's expecting, or, you know, he gets the questions that you're going to get asked after the first scrimmage. Well, hey, how did things go? The first thing he says is, listen, we ain't talking about quarterbacks. All three of these quarterbacks that we've got between Carson Beck, Gunnar Stockton, Brock Vandegrift, all three of these guys had some shining lights, but they also had some not so good shining lights. Every one of them needs to improve in their game. A lot of this, again, coach speak. Me and Hunter have talked about this. The coach is going to do this. He's going to tell the media somewhat what they want to hear, but not at all what they want to hear, but more what he wants his players to hear if it gets back to them. That way you kind of get it in both sides, you know, after a practice, during a practice. He's able to tell them what he expects from them, but then go and talk to the media. He tells the media what he expects from them. That way, if it gets back to him, hey, it's him talking to them again and making sure that they understand you have to improve. this wasn't only on the quarterback situation. Apparently, the offensive line, who I anticipated and expect to be one of the best lines in the country, if not the best. Past couple of years, I've felt this way. They haven't got the accolades for it, but they're still a really good O-line. And I think they're going to be a really good O-line this year too. But they got whipped by a D-line that I'm kind of curious about. Biggest question right now that I've started to see arise is Georgia's defensive line. We've got some stuff that we've got to figure out. We don't have a Jalen Carter in the middle. You don't have that big guy who's rushing through the line, and that's just stacking guys on the O-line up. So we've kind of got to figure things out there, but it sounds like the D-line won the battle in the first scrimmage against that offensive line. So they have to continue to bulk up. We've got injuries. And it's normal for this to happen. But what I was looking at, it looks like there's a lot more injuries in key positions. You know, we've got multiple running backs, and we're going to get into the injuries here in just a minute after we come through these scrimmages. But you've got some injuries in your running back room that are leaving, you know, Deshaun Edwards, he's carrying the ones, which is fine. That's a guy, okay, he's a senior. He's deserved to be in that spot as a one role, and he has proven to you, yeah, he can run the ball. He can run people over. Then behind him is Cash Jones. And you're thinking, wait a minute, Kendall Milton, you know, we got these other guys. Branson Robinson, another guy who should be in there. So what's going on with that? Wideout, same thing. You know, Kirby kind of talked about some drop balls, and then you go to find out Kirby's soaking the ball throughout practice, trying to create something. This was something I heard the other day, and I was like, this is genius. Sometimes when you can't create havoc or you can't create a difficult situation in your practices because you've got the best team playing against the best team. You've got Georgia's offense playing against Georgia's defense. For the past 2 years, has ended up being the best team in the country. You do have new guys in there. You have to battle the complacency with the older guys. But with the new guys that are coming in, they ain't want anything. They got to learn and figure things out. So when you're having really good practices or when you're having really good scrimmages and everything's going good, you have to create some adversity in some way. So by soaking the ball right there, pretty smart. That's a good way to make it difficult for your players to be able to catch a ball, to be able to throw a ball, to be able to hold on to a ball, all of the above when you're getting into a scrimmage, when you're getting into a practice like that. But it also prepares you. There are going to be games that it rains. It happens almost every year against Kentucky, it feels like. So you are also kind of preparing yourself for that. Obviously, in the weeks coming up to games, if it looks like it's going to be a rainy game, Kirby does a great job of making sure, hey, we're doing wet ball drills all week long. So that way, if this is a rainy game, we're prepared for that. We can't come into this game non-prepared and all of a sudden, hey, here we go. It's raining. We can't throw a ball. We can't hold on to a ball. We can't catch a ball. You can't have that. So obviously Kirby is not only preparing his guys for that, but it's also creating some adversity and trying to grow his players as well. Defensively, again, we've got injuries, but there's things that have to be figured out there as well. To me, the pressure that I saw from Kirby was more or less, again, just getting this point across to his own players that, hey, everybody needs to grow in all aspects. Doesn't seem like he was very impressed and excited about the scrimmage afterwards. But, again, I think that's because Kirby knows what it takes to get to the end. And until you get to the end, you're not there, right? So he knows what it takes. Obviously, the past 2 years he has gotten there. He knew what it took, got them to that place. But I don't think he would ever rest, better never rest, as we're talking about this year. I don't think he will ever rest on that and saying, no, we're not good enough. We're not there yet until you actually play the game and until you actually win the national championship. And when you win the national championship, that's probably when he looks at the team and he goes, yeah, I guess y'all figured it out. But I think it takes until that point because Kirby knows. And I also trust him in a sense of knowing, hey, Kirby knows what he's talking about. And we're not there yet. The tough part, for me at least, looking at this schedule, the first couple of weeks are essentially, to me, I'm not trying to beat down on a UAB, a Ball State, a UT Martin. I'm not trying to beat down on these teams and speak down to them, but it will be a glorified scrimmage against these teams. And if it's not, if it's a game that's tough, Georgia does indeed have a lot that they have to figure out and learn and get prepared for because playing against a Ball State is not the same as playing against Tennessee at the end of November. So luckily, I will say that slightly at least, luckily the first few weeks will be glorified scrimmages against very easy opponents. And I'm going to say it that way because everybody talks about the schedule and how easy it is. Luckily, Georgia starts that way. I would much rather start the season that way, even though, you know, we're all hype and we're all excited 17 days away from September 2nd, where we're going to play UT Martin. Where it's like you get really excited and you're like, man, here we go, start of the season. And then the first quarter goes by and you're like, oh, it's 28-0. And then you're sitting back going, well, all right, well, we'll get ready for next week. And then you play UAB. And I'm not trying to, again, speak down on those, but when you're playing lesser opponents, the good thing about it is it's glorified scrimmage. You get a lot of guys, a lot of reps. I don't think we're going to see Brock. I don't think we're going to see Carson Beck very much in those games. I think you're going to get a half out of him. And then Brock's going to get his chance. And Gunner is probably going to get his chance to make sure all of these guys are ready. It's not going to be all three of these guys playing in or out once we get to South Carolina. It's not going to be that same way when we go to Jordan-Hare. Okay, it might be, depending on how things are going, but usually not. But these first few weeks, luckily we have that opportunity, and I say this every week, especially when we go into bye weeks. When guys are getting hurt, we have that chance to rest these guys because they don't have to be on the field for these big games. But when they are rested and when they do start to get healthy, they still have to get back on the field and get their feet back under them before you all of a sudden have a South Carolina coming into you, before you're headed to Jordan-Hare, before Ole Miss comes to town, and especially before you go to Neyland at the end of November. So the start of the season, luckily we get to just kind of ease into it. We're all hyped up. We're all excited for the start of the season. Trust me, I'm right there with you. I am too. But we also have to be prepared for these games, not necessarily being all that fun, but you get to see the experience. You get to see these guys get experience, meaningful snaps in games that aren't going to matter all that much in the grand scheme of things once we get a few weeks in. Again, once we get to that South Carolina slate and we start to actually play tougher opponents, again, getting into the SEC slate, then we'll truly start to see where is it that Georgia's lining up in this point. But luckily, we've got a few weeks as we get into the season to prepare for that and hopefully also get some of these other guys back. Looking at some of the injuries, some of the big ones right now, Kendall Milton battling a hamstring. He seems like every year he's having something that he's kind of battling against, and I hate it for him. The good thing is with adversity, a lot of times comes a much stronger player. It's very difficult while you're battling that adversity, while you can't be on the field, while you're not able to work out, while you're not able to do these things because you're kind of in your head, you know. But to me, if you're at least doing everything you can to let me at least do what I can. Let me watch film. Let me see how I can get better in this way. Let me mentally prepare myself for the game so that way physically when I can get back on the field, I've got it on top of my shoulders. I know what I need to be doing. I know the game plan that I have in front of me and that the coaches and the staff have ready for me. I mentally know what I'm doing. Now, physically, I just have to get back on track. I got to get my legs back under him, and I'm ready to go. Kendall Milton's one down. I told you guys Branson Robinson, he's down. He had a no-contact jersey on this last couple of practices, so he's limited. Don't think he's going to be out long. Kamari Lassiter, he is one that, to me, is a lot bigger. I think he's got like an upper ankle strain, something like that. And that, I'll be honest with you, I don't know how long he's going to be out. We're going to talk a little bit about defense here in just a minute and just kind of run through our expectations for the defense. But with Kamari being out, I really think that's a kind of a void position. That's something that I don't know that there's really a battle as much as we got to figure out who's going to fill those shoes because Kamari is a really good football player, and he fills a huge role on that defense for us, and he's out as well. Smile Munden, he's another guy. He's out right now, but supposedly he's ahead of schedule. I think Smile, I could be wrong about this, but I think Smile was the one in the national championship game that had gotten hurt like in the third or fourth quarter, I believe, and he came out. I think that's still kind of recovering from that injury there. So really excited to get these guys back. Again, luckily we're 17 days from the season, so I think by the time we get to season, we're going to have these guys ready. We still have another scrimmage to go. You still have a couple of weeks left of fall camp practices that are real rigorous. It's hot. It is hot in South Georgia right now. It's hot in Athens, Georgia, too. So it's not easy to go out there every day and play and practice and not get hurt and not be dehydrated. I think we had some of that going on with one of the offensive linemen, too. So there's a lot that people are battling right now We want to hope, and every year we say this, our biggest hope is coming into the start of the season that we're not injury. You know, we're not battling so many injuries that we're really limited to what we can do. And that's where I just reflect back to that schedule that Kirby will tell you, hey, come and play it, big boy, regardless of whether you like what it is or not. We can't do anything about it. But luckily, these first couple of weeks, we have kind of that opportunity not to take our foot off the pedal, but get some guys healthy, meaningful snaps for these other guys, and kind of get prepared for what's coming down the line again, where it starts to become some of these other bigger games. So let's get into some of the defensive talk, some of these defensive expectations for Georgia in the 2023 season. And this is just kind of looking at some of the guys that I believe is kind of where we're looking at as far as starting positions. And this is definitely not set in stone. This doesn't mean this is exactly what it is, but you've got some position battles that are going on. Last time we talked about offense a little bit. So let's kind of get into some of the defense. And some of these names that I'm really going to pop out, these are some of the guys that not only have had meaningful snaps in the past, but have been a key asset to our defense, have been a key asset, and I expect them to be that same way this year. Defensive end, you got Michael Williams, a sophomore, Tremel Walthor, senior, Tyron Ingram Dawkins. Also, he's a redshirt sophomore. So you got a few guys there at defensive end. I think it's up to Michael Williams and Tremel Walthor in this one. That's a pretty good battle there for the defensive end positions. And then Tyron Ingram Dawkins also as well. At nose tackle, Nazir Stackhouse, he's a senior, but he's also a guy who's been in there a lot. Zion Logue, too. And a lot of this that I want to talk about with the defense, these guys that we're going to talk about, we talk about it every year. Kirby knows how to rotate these guys in and out, and we do it a lot. There are not very many positions, with exception at least to where Kamari Lassiter is standing. There's not a lot of roll in and out. There is a lot of rolling in and out. There's a lot of substitution that goes on in these. So most all of these names that we're going to read, you're going to see their name pop up. You have already seen their name pop up in meaningful situations, and it's going to be the same in this. So this is not really as much as hey, this is who's starting, as much as these are the guys more likely you're going to be seeing as we get into it. Defensive tackle Warren Brinson, a senior, and Miller. Can't say it. A redshirt freshman that's also coming in there. In the linebacker spots, you get Chaz Chambliss back, which will be nice to see him back. Only a junior. He was one last year, man. He looked so great, and then he got hurt. I can't remember. Did he get hurt against Ohio State, or was it against TCU? I think it was against Ohio State. But Chaz is a guy who he came a long way. He stepped up in a big way last year when Nolan Smith got hurt. By the way, this is throwing it back a couple of weeks. Terry Godwin. I kept saying big number 5, big Godwin, when I was talking about the offense in the Notre Dame game that we played. Terry Godwin. Why in the world I could not think of his name the other day to save my life, I don't know. But that's where I go to that. But Chaz Chambliss, man, it's going to be good to have him back. Darius Smith or Marvin Jones Jr. coming in as well. Damon Wilson, and even Samuel Mapumba. So these are some good guys that you're going to see coming up in that linebacker position. Chaz and Darius, I think, are going to be two of the main guys there. Also on the other side, you got Smile Munden. Again, he's battling injury as well, but coming in as a junior, man, we want to see him on the field because he did big things for us last year, and I think he'll do the same this year. You got Xavier Sori also in there, and Jalen Walker. Jalen Walker, as a sophomore, man, what a freshman season he had. Even in the SEC or national championship game, I mean, he had meaningful snaps, sacking guys in the national championship game as a freshman. What a dude. We continue on into some of the other positions, that Mike position there. One of the biggest guys and one of the biggest standouts that I think we're going to see this year in the Mike position, Jamon Dumas Johnson. Dude is a beast. Dude was a beast last year as a sophomore. He was one, I think we talked about this last time. To me, he reminds me like a mix between Nolan Smith and a Roquan. I know they're not playing the same position, but he still, to me, had that. I don't know, he has that nose where it looks like he can cover the entire field like Roquan used to, but he can also get right down there with them. So you got him, C.J. Allen as well as a freshman there. And then in the star position, you got Tyke Smith. Going to be good to see him back and healthy in this. And then Javon Bullard. I mean, that's the biggest. I mean, it's going to be Javon. Well, I guess technically, Javon more than likely, let's see. He's going to more than likely be in that safety position, but you've at least got him to be able to rotate in that star as well. And then we jump down to the cornerbacks. You got Dalen Everett, Nylan Green, and A.J. Harris. one side, and then the other Kamari Lassiter, Julian Humphrey. I think Julian Humphrey is going to be that guy who's really got to step up in that position for Kamari. We'll see. We'll see. Again, I don't think we're going to see – I don't think Kamari Lassiter is going to be ready by the start of the season. I could be wrong about that. We've got 17 days. I don't know how much longer it's going to take him to get back. I would hope by week 2 or 3, maybe he's back, but I really don't know. I don't know the extent of the injury and how long it's going to take him to recover from that and get back. But I know that we're going to need him, especially deep into the season. So if we have to deal without him at the beginning, get him back by the middle, and by the end of the season he's healthy, that's where we want to be standing with that. And then we get into the safety spots again. Javon Bullard, David Daniel, those two guys rolling in and out. And you got on the other side Malachi Starks and Dan Jackson. Man, it's good to see Dirty Dan back. You know, I feel like he got hurt. Was that the start of the season this past year? I really don't remember. I need to look back at that. But Dan Jackson, I mean, seeing him a couple of years ago, especially against Arkansas, getting the block punt in the end zone that kind of lit things up. But he's been a dude he's not afraid to run somebody over, even in that national championship game that year. But it'll be good to kind of see him get back in there as well. So I'm excited for what Georgia's defense can do. Year after year, I used to always say this: can Georgia put the pieces together to have a good offense and a good defense? 2012 had a pretty good defense, should have had a pretty good offense, but they just didn't come together. Couldn't get the job done. 17 had a really good defense. Offensively, we kind of lacked a little bit. Couldn't get the job done. Even though we're right there on the outside knocking in. We were right there at it. And maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe we had all the pieces and we just couldn't put the pieces together at the right time. Maybe that's what it was. Past 2 seasons, though, you've had the defense for sure. Best defense in the country, especially 2 years ago. Great offense. And then this past year, defense kind of took a little bit of a tone back, but the offense took a step up. This year, my question is, okay, we've had the past 2 seasons, we've had a lot of guys drafted on defense. That first year, we had all those guys drafted, and they said, all right, well, Georgia's defense can't be that good this year. They lost this many guys, and they were. But we lost a lot of guys again last year. How many times can we go year after year where we lose a lot of guys, but we continue to keep that same elevation, that same level of defensive prowess that we have the past couple of seasons? How long can we go drafting all these guys and stay right there at the top on the defensive position? To be honest with you, I think we're going to be okay. Again, when I read through the names of these guys on defense, I think Georgia's still in a really good position. We've got some guys who have some seniors to them. You know, they've got that veteranism to them. But we've also got a lot of young guys, which is exciting, but it make you a little bit nervous. You know, when you get a sophomore in there that he's got snaps for sure. How much can these guys step up as leaders, whether it's the sophomores, whether it's the juniors and seniors that are on that defense? We've got to have the leadership. I think that's where it starts. You get the leadership, and it trickles down from there. And if you can have good leadership on the defense, we're going to be good to go on that. So that's what we've got on the defensive talk. We're getting geared up and ready for the second scrimmage that's coming up this weekend. And we'll be sure next week as we kind of get into things to talk about that, because that'll be our talking point next week. And it's going to be wild to think, too, that once we get to that point, we ain't got much longer. We got, this weekend, and then the following weekend, and then we're football ready, because come Saturday, 14 days, 2 weeks. 2 weeks till the start of the season. Man, that's nuts. It's also really exciting. So, hey, make sure you guys follow us over on Twitter at Dawg Talk 20. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, all the things, Threads now, which is evidently a thing. And I don't think it's Twitter. I think I said it wrong. It's technically X now. So make sure you guys follow us on all of the platforms. And if you guys want to support the show, hit that Patreon link in the description below as well. I'd greatly appreciate it. Otherwise, we'll check in with you guys next week. Go Dogs.